For Sunday, September 18th, you have found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, Kemp is sued. We've got the Soros factor in Georgia politics, and Trump is up in Georgia. These and other topics on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Good morning, I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams, and we've got a new panel. I want to welcome two newcomers. We have on this end Jennifer Hazelton, who's of course been on the show before, but is now working with the Georgia Trump campaign. And I want to tell our viewers that we intend to have someone from the Hillary Clinton campaign come in as a guest, so that should be fun down the road. And of course, our regular Alexa Scott, welcome. And Fox 5 political analyst Matt Towery joins us again.
Nice to be back.
Thank you. And let's start off with some of the news of the day. And Secretary of State Brian Kemp just can't seem to have much luck lately. And again, news came last week that various left-wing groups have sued him over the voter registration process that's going on. In fact, one of the issues is, should he be so strict as to match your voter information with the information with the Department of Driver Services and the Social Security Administration? I'm going to go down the table. Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it doesn't surprise me. This is the season in which we see these sort of lawsuits pop up. This strict voter ID in general is not necessarily faring well in many of the courts around the country. Georgia, of course, went pretty strong, just like many of the states surrounding it. We'll wait and see what happens. I'm not surprised, though. This is the type of stuff that you see around election time, wouldn't you say, Alexis?
Yeah, I think so. But plus, the big thing is that more than 60% of the rejected registrations are for black Georgians. And so there is a racial component to it, and it seems that they need to make some kind of allowance or have what do you call it when you can vote anyway? Provisional voting. Ballot. And instead of just outright rejecting them. So perhaps they'll come to some accommodation before next week when early voting starts.
Right. Jennifer?
Well, the hits just keep on coming for poor Secretary Kemp. It's been a long summer for him. But I do agree with him, and I agree with Matt, that this is the time where we see these types of lawsuits aimed at disrupting the polling process in November. But at the end of the day, Georgia's right to maintain the integrity of its electoral process must be maintained, and I think the state will prevail on this one. It's not going to go very far.
Okay, well, that's looking in the crystal ball. There's another issue that heated up last week, too, and that is the First Amendment on our November 8th ballot, which has to do, Alexis, you and I have debated this one on the Opportunity School District, which, to use your words, Matt, if a school is perennially failing, it's an intervention by the state. Let me again go down the table on this one. Alexis, you go ahead and start.
Well, I think there is a matter of contention there, primarily from local elected school boards. I think the Muskogee board is supposed to vote this week to oppose it. And the campaigns have started on both sides to promote the ballot, which is called Amendment 1, and it would allow the state to take over control of a so-called failing school. So I think that the opposition believes in local control, and they're trying to find ways to improve schools. And I have my standard thing that schools perform along the lines of their socioeconomic means, so that if you want better schools, give them more money and give them more support.
Right. Jennifer?
Well, throwing money at the problem hasn't borne any results, as we've seen since the 1960s. If you track education spending since the 60s, it's exploded, but we've actually seen an overall decrease in results. So I don't know that money's the problem. What I do like about this plan is the option to turn failing schools into charter schools. I think that's a good idea. And I think the governor's head and heart are in the right place on this issue. If you've got a school board that isn't functioning up to task, isn't taking care of business, there's got to be some mechanism for the state to step in to make sure these kids get a quality education. So, there's got to be something here that we can do.
Well, certainly we need to continue to try to improve the issue, though, more than just money for the schools, is money for these families. Poverty begets.
Well, I think the real question is, will it pass? And from my experience as a prior legislator and as a lawyer, Usually what happens here is the Governor Deal has a very talented legal team, and there are very talented lawyers who work for the legislature as well. My guess is that amendment is written in a way that when you read it, you're going to say, yes, I want to vote for it. I would imagine that within the bounds of what they're allowed to do. So the advertising, we'll see who advertises the most and has the strongest message, and the language on the ballot will really decide it, because most Georgians don't even know this amendment exists right now.
Right, and the language is definitely written so that you would vote in the affirmative.
Well, and that's what good that's what good counsel does, and Governor Deal has some very strong legal talent.
Well, that's right, and of course the ad wars are going to be kicking up too. You already see ads on both sides. You know, I think we ought to recognize last week what the U.S. News and World Report college ratings did, and Matt, it's particularly hits home because it mirrored James Magazine's ratings, which you founded.
Which you now run.
Yeah, and so a shameless plug for our viewers, right. But the top 4 schools in the state that we can all be proud of is Emory University, Georgia Tech, the University of Georgia, and a new listing for the U.S. News and World Report was Mercer University, which I think was well deserved. I don't know if any of you wanted to comment on that or saw that.
Well, I'm an alum of 2 of them, so as an alum of UGA and Emory, I'm very proud of the fact that we're doing so well in the national rankings. I think all of those top 4 schools are going to continue to rise up the national rankings. The crop of students they're getting year after year is excellent. I have interns to prove it, that I know they're fantastic. But I will say we've got to look at the cost of tuition too, and what can we do to make these excellent schools more attainable for students so they're not leaving college with a mountain of debt. And I think one way to get at the problem is to start cutting back on the bureaucracy at these schools. That's the main driver of cost in colleges right now, is the glut of administrative overhead. And that's something that I think nationwide will have to be tackled within the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, that's an interesting observation, but what do you do with the private schools? I mean, I think they are beholden to no one but themselves to do what they want to do with that in terms of administrative costs. But at the same time, Emory has come up with a program to assist students who need tuition. So I think that's going to be the way to go, is to figure out how to help pay for higher education tuition.
Well, in the public university system, they did have a tuition freeze, but I don't know if they're going to do that again or if they can do that again. Right. Anyhow.
But they could also pick up the Obama and the Clinton proposal to make it free.
I knew you were going to say that.
Tuition free. I mean, in the 21st century.
Quote unquote free.
And back on planet Earth.
well, just like K through 12 is free, in theory, but not in effect.
Someone's paying for salaries and buildings.
Everybody, there is a cost, but not to the people, to the students who can't afford it.
Well, to segue, and Matt, we can turn to you on this, just to look at when the legislature starts in January, they're going to be kind of looking at funding for schools. They're going to be looking at how you help with the lottery, and because that helps, of course, with our Hope Scholarship and tuition. And casino gambling, Matt, if you want to look into the crystal ball, that's going to be a big issue again.
I have said this over and over again, that we will have casino gambling in Georgia. Part of the reason we'll have it is because the Hope Scholarship, it's hard to keep the levels that we had years ago. Our lottery is run fantastically. We have a great lottery, but you can only do so much with it, and you can only invent so many games. And in the end, casino gambling, regulated, done the right way. We're not talking about the mob here. We're talking about big corporations that are in the business, clean, good folks operating in Georgia, would generate a lot of money that would end up keeping hope alive for many generations to come. I was in the legislature when we started the Hope Scholarship, and we had plenty of money then, but I can tell you they're getting nervous now. And I think even Governor Deal, who's not a fan of gambling, I understand, may say, let the people vote on this, and if they want it like they did the lottery to fund Hope Scholarship, then so be it.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time. I mean, the state sees everybody driving to Alabama, North Carolina, Florida, every place else to go gamble.
I think it would be this year, and here's the reason I say that. You have a gubernatorial race coming up the next year. Nobody wants to have casino gambling floating around in the gubernatorial year, and then the year after that, you're way down the road. So I think you're going to see it pass this year, at least a referendum.
I think let the voters decide. Put it up as a constitutional amendment. Let the voters decide. One question, though, I do have, you raised up the point about the money running out. When the lottery started, it was Generation X who was college age, and they were a very small generation, a lot less people. Part of the reason why we're under these fiscal constraints is because we've got a very large millennial generation, largest generation ever, and they're all college age.
Very good point.
So after we get past this bump of the millennials, what does that next size, that Generation Z, if they're not that big of a generation, comparatively, this problem may end up taking care of itself.
Okay, you have the last word. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some outside influences influencing Henry County politics. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Welcome back to the Georgia Gang. I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams. And there was a lot of action in Henry County, just below Atlanta. And this is pretty bizarre. Or inaction, you're right. The district attorney candidate, a Republican, was forced out of the race because he was very upset that one George Soros, the far-left financier, his committee had dumped in $100,000 to Darius Patillo, who was the Democrat DA candidate. And so, to the chagrin of the local county GOP, they cannot replace their candidate. So by default, Mr. Patillo is going to win on the ballot.
Yes, you say he was forced out. He saw he could not win, and so he got out. I don't think he was forced out.
Well, I think you're actually right. I think he felt he couldn't compete with the money.
He was also afraid of attacks on his family,
yes.
too.
Well,
yes, they started a smear campaign, according to the GOP candidate. But Alexis, you're basically right. I think, and a lot of people aren't happy. Of course, some say he should have stood and fought.
Well, this is just downright, I mean, it's downright evil what's going on now, and actions like this should be a flare to Americans about what people like George Soros are trying to do to our country and influence the way we...
Citizens United, you mean? What are you talking about? Money in campaigns?
Yeah,
you don't
I have to say, look, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you may not like George Soros, you may not like his politics, but as long as they do legal things, not illegal things, I mean, I don't think anybody has a position to complain about it. I mean, we're the Koch brothers. They could put the money in there as well.
That's right.
So, you know, it was unfortunate for that candidate. It's not that I don't have sympathy, and I'm not saying I applaud Soros's politics one way or another, but he's got a right to do it.
Right, and plus the police, what is it, the Policemen's Benevolent Association has backed Darius, whatever his
Well, Darius Patillo, and actually
Patillo.
I know Darius Patillo, and he's a good prosecutor in DeKalb County.
I was going to say he's an assistant DA in DeKalb
Right.
already, so he's had experience, and so he...
But it is a shame that if this fellow was going to drop out, whether there was Soros money or not, he should have done it a little earlier.
Exactly.
And also, this, just to finish this point, the Soros money is going into other races around the country. Another DA out west dropped out because of the money. And then I'm told that Brian Strickland, who represents Henry County, he's a state legislator, is facing some of the Soros money, as is Megan Hansen, who's in fighting to get a Brookhaven seat.
And that's why people need to pay attention to this. By going after the small races, it's very easy for these things to go under the radar or for people not to connect the dots. But it's pretty clear that this is an emerging strategy. And it's something that Americans need to be aware of. And it's honestly, it's a smart strategy if you're going to go under the radar and try to affect the next generation of
legislators.
Yeah.
I think that is a smart strategy, and it's part of what is, I think, the effort to turn Georgia purple, if not blue.
I think it's an effort to just make sure America's a one-party
country.
But anyhow,
Excuse
Alexis,
me?
I'm going to turn to you because of your expertise with the King family. There was some news, as you know, this past week that there's going to be the opening of the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. soon. And set the stage and analyze for us the property of Martin Luther King is at issue here.
Well, I don't know that the property is at issue here, particularly with the museum, but much has been made of the fact that no major King memorabilia will be a part of the opening of the museum. And the museum, as you know, is a free museum paid for by us taxpayers, but free to the public to enter. And it's the first African American museum to be on the Mall in Washington, D.C. And certainly there was an effort to see about getting something from the King family to have in the museum. Unfortunately, the family members were in a litigation period earlier this year when it would have been the time to have something. So I think it's just not going to be here for the opening, but it doesn't preclude something happening down the road.
The museum wanted something permanent, and they didn't. The King family didn't want to do that. Is that correct?
Well, I don't think it ever got to that point.
Okay.
Because of the litigation that was at stake. They never got to discuss it because.
Matt, you've got some thoughts on this.
Well, you know, I worked with the King family back many years ago on some of these issues. I felt like at the time and even now that it is their intellectual property. I mean, you inherit things from your father and your mother, and a Nobel Prize and a Bible, and even his writings, which are, they're copyrighted. Those are their property, and I always believe that very strongly. I think the King family is just beaten up in Atlanta. I don't know why it is in Atlanta, Georgia, we always have to beat up everybody who's from this city. I just think it's crazy. I mean, we should be proud that they went through a hard time. Their father was assassinated. Give them a break.
Yes.
They're good people.
They were young children when this happened, and
Exactly.
I agree with what Matt's saying. It's up to them, and I think that they appreciate the significance more than anybody else of his sacrifice and his contribution to this country, and so they will eventually work something out.
Okay, let me throw something out. You may have seen the news that this week the Atlanta City Council is going to decide on what to do with the very popular Uber and Lyft programs, and there's been problems over the last year. There's been some arrests of Uber drivers, which should never have happened, but I'll just go down the table real quickly. We've got about a minute left, and any thoughts on that, Jennifer?
Competition is a good thing. If the airport can find a way to, make sure that we've got the right people and they can ensure the security of passengers, but also expand competition, I think ultimately it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that Uber and Lyft have been disruptive to the taxi industry, and the taxi industry is just going to have to get on board and figure it out, and everybody can just be on call and get your taxi when you need it.
Ditto, Alexis.
Thank you for that analysis. Yes, and just to finish up this segment, as a Fulton County taxpayer who's been upset along with thousands of Fulton Countyans about the assessments in recent years and the mistakes and the dysfunction in the assessor's office, I was glad to see that David Fitzgibbons was given the boot. He was the chief tax assessor, so goodbye, and hopefully there'll be some more efficiency and reform. Stay with us. We'll be back to talk about some presidential polling that Matt Tower is going to share with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Welcome back to the Georgia Gang. I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams. And we're going to talk a little bit about presidential politics as it relates to Georgia and some politics in general. And Matt, you and Opinion Savvy did a poll for Fox 5 that came out Friday. Tell us a little bit about that. Is Donald Trump up in Georgia?
He is. Opinion Savvy, of course, is not my firm. My son runs it, but and they're ranked #3 in the nation now by Bloomberg for accuracy. So we're very proud for all the Fox affiliates that use Opinion Savvy, including Fox 5. Here in Georgia, Donald Trump has gone from being even a couple of weeks ago in our last Opinion Savvy poll. Now he is up by 4 points. It's 46-44. The Libertarians at 10, and there's some undecided, but not a lot. Trump is moving up. Interesting note here, though. Part of that move is, and you find this amazing, Alexis, it's a 22% African-American support. Now, let me just warn all viewers, that will not hold. I've seen Republicans have this far out, and it comes down. But what tells me that Trump might do a little better in that community than other candidates of recent years is I've never seen one come from 0 up to 20-something%. So it's, this is a crazy election, guys. I do think that that Trump is at least in the position that most Republican candidates in recent cycles where they have won Georgia would be in. I don't consider Georgia now to be a battleground state as much as a keep your eye on state right now.
Interesting.
Alexis, any thoughts on that?
No, I just think probably what is happening is that the people are settling out, that the Republicans are going home to Donald Trump, and the Republicans and the Democrats are lining up behind the Democrats, and Georgia is still a red state.
I think the polls have been trending in our direction now. Speaking as a part of the campaign, we're very happy about that. I also think that we've done a good job here in Georgia of showing how unified the Republican Party is behind the Trump candidacy. We put out a release out this week showing that the entire Republican congressional delegation is behind our candidacy. We are the first battleground major delegation to be able to say that. We're very proud of that. And you know, I think we're all moving in the same direction. We feel united. We feel like, you know, we're firing on all cylinders. It's a train heading down the tracks. Everybody's on the Trump train, and we feel good about it. And I think if you kind of contrast that with the really bad week that Hillary Clinton has had this past week, between her employees taking the fifth, you know, the people she contracted for her server in front of Congress, to calling, you know, as many as 50% of Americans as deplorables, to her health problems. You know, Donald Trump continues to be solid and speaking on policies that matter to Americans, and Hillary keeps getting sidetracked by scandal.
I know Alexis will want to answer that, but before she does, let's talk a little bit. Let's talk about our senior senator, Johnny Isakson, who's also up for re-election. You had a poll on that, and Alexis, I'll come back to you.
Okay, he's at 47% in the Opinion Savvy poll for Fox 5. His opponent, Barksdale, is at, I think, 34% or so. There's some undecided, fairly high, 13%, and Libertarians in at about 6%. Isakson would, by all counts, win this race. You have 13% undecided. If it went the normal break, then he would win about 51, 52%. But Barksdale is coming on with, I am told, a $3 million ad campaign. If he does that, Isakson will have to spend some more money and get his message out, because the one area that Democrats are doing better in than Republicans this year are the age group of 30 to 44. In both Trump and Isakson's case, the Democrat is leading by more than 10 points. So he's going to need some help in that area. I think Isaacson's still the likely winner, but it's going to be a competitive race.
Yeah.
Alexis, what about Hillary Clinton's bad 2 weeks?
Well, I don't think they were bad 2 weeks. I mean, she got pneumonia, so that was bad for her physically. But I think she did go home and get some rest, and she's back out on the campaign trail. And I don't know, you know, Donald Trump has been staying on message to some degree, but then he'll come off and do things like show his doctor's report on Dr. Oz at a TV show. So he keeps making a spectacle of himself, and I don't think that's, you know, that's what you want in your president.
The way Obama goes on Jimmy Fallon and does the, what do they call that? The
Obama's
slow,
not
the
running
news.
for re-election.
No, but the point is they all do this stuff.
What?
They all do this stuff. They all go on talk
Oz
shows.
With their medical records?
Hillary Clinton goes on The View. Is that any different?
It is different when you are trying to disclose in a serious fashion your health report, your health record.
Well, he could have gone on General Hospital.
Okay, Matt gets the last word on that one. Guess what? We're coming up on winners and losers, so stay with us.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Welcome back to the Georgia Gang. I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams, and we're going to start with Jennifer Hazelton on some winners and losers.
All right, so my loser is David Fitzgibbons from the Fulton County Tax Appraiser's Office. I think we kind of all know why. He's now out of a job, so that explains the way his week went. My winners are actually 3 women from North Georgia, working class, middle class moms, who showed up to our rally on Monday wearing black t-shirts that they made at Hobby Lobby that had the word deplorables across them. And in that gesture, a picture was taken by the AJC, blasted out across the AP, went viral. They were on cable shows all over the country, and they put a face to Trump supporters and basically in just the simple gesture of that t-shirt and their presence, they blew a hole in Hillary Clinton's comments about Trump supporters being deplorable people. So hats off to them. They've done us all a favor.
Okay, so perhaps I might have a disagreement with you on that, because the polls seem to show that maybe half of the supporters of Trump are deplorable people, but we'll save it for another week.
But anyhow, go ahead with your winners and losers.
All right, I'm going to salute Irving Johnson. Is that his name? He's the new DeKalb tax commissioner.
Yes.
He won in court, and he won at the ballot as well. He was the assistant to the tax commissioner, and he prevailed at the ballot, and the courts found that he should not have had to do that, or he could have run as an incumbent and didn't need a special election. Also, the Atlanta Community Tool Bank celebrates its 25th anniversary this weekend, and that is, of course, the organization that helps people do things that they wouldn't be able to afford to do without those tool assistance. And also the AIDS Healthcare Foundation opened its Out of the Closet thrift store on Cheshire Bridge Road this weekend. So congratulations to them for that assistance. And then the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival today is having a retrospective for Gene Wilder movies, which is really
we
exciting.
all love Gene Wilder.
Everybody loves
Yeah,
Gene
so there are 4 stories. You still have time. If you're looking at this in the morning, you have time to go. It's 4 movies up at the Sandy Springs LaFont
Thank you
Theater.
for mentioning that, Matt. We got about a minute left.
Hey, Alexis just gave us her Academy Award acceptance speech. All right, my winner very quickly is my old friend Newt Gingrich. He blew into town, gave a speech out of Kennesaw, met with longtime party leaders who have not been for Donald Trump so far in a private lunch, brought them to the table, probably unified Georgia Republican Party for Trump. So good job, Newt. My losers, Sandy Springs and Cobb County. Look, we have the Braves coming in a year. Unfortunately, the political apparatus of this state is not prepared for the snowmageddon we're going to have when all of that traffic fuels in. And to add on top of that, Sandy Springs now wants a new land use plan that's going to add more townhouses and offices and the like, smack dab on Powers Ferry.
Okay, I've got a winner, and that was the late Lillian Webb, who was the longtime Gwinnett County Commission Chairman and Mayor of Norcross. And we lost her at age 87, but she was a great public servant. See us again next week on The Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.